We each of us have a good alibi for being down here in the joint, but few of them reality are justified if you get right down to the point. You've heard of a woman's glory being spent on a downright, so you can't always judge the story as true being told by her, and heard confidence tales from each gal. Only one seemed interesting and truthful. The story of the were close and tough. She never once faltered from duty to play on the up and up. Sal told me this tale on the evening, before she was turned out free, and I'll do my best to relate it, just as she told it to me. I was born not treated like Helen of Troy. I was taught that laws were rulers, and lived as a greasy cowboy. Then I left my home for the city, to play in its mad, dizzy world, not knowing how little of pity it holds for a country, a professional killer from Chacon. I couldn't help loving him madly. For him, even I would die. One year we were desperately happy. Our ill-gotten gains we spent free. I was taught the ways of the underworld. Jack was like a god to me. I got on the SBA payroll to get the inside layer of the job. The bank was turning big money. It looked like a cinch for a cinch without even a rubble. Jack was last with a week in the door. When the teller dead-aimed a revolver from where they forced him to lie on the floor. I knew I only had a moment. He would surely get Jack as he ran. So I staged a big fade-out beside him and knocked the 45 out of his hand. They wrapped me down big at the station and informed me that I did the blame. For the dramatic stuff pulled on the teller looked to them too much. Please call it a frame-up. Said it was an inside job. But I steadily denied any knowledge or dealings with underworld mobs. The gang hired a couple of lawyers, the best fixers in any man's town. But it takes more than lawyers and money when Uncle Sam starts shaking the job. I was charged as a crime of kidnapping and tried for my wisdom of sin. The dirty dozen found me guilty for out the side and not even 45 out of his hand. His left knee down the main position, and forward the opposite way, with a dramatic stop hold on the power. Too much like a drink. The police call it a frame-up. But I steadily denied any knowledge or dealings with underlying laws. This is a private professional fixer is taking into account, but it takes more than a little life when all of the uncertainty is down. I was charged with a fine journalist and charged for my wages of sin. But then he reconciled me with from 5 to 60 years in the pen. I took the laugh like a people, and never once thought that I made. Jeff dropped his soul on the promise that we make a sensational break. Well, to shorten the sad movie story, I really have gone over my head. Without even so much as a letter, I started by touching the dead. But not long ago I discovered, on the down in my neighborhood, that Jack and his mad had got away and living in true elusive style. If he had returned to me sometime, though he hadn't listened to me, I forget all the hell that he caused me and love him as long as I live. But there's no chance of his ever coming, for he and his law have no fears. That the I will die in prison will last me 50 years. Tomorrow I'll be on the outside, and I'll drop myself on it today. I'll phone them if they give me the hot slot on an island out here in the bay. The iron doors swung wide next wind for a gruesome woman of waste, who at night has a chance to fix it.
Of a jilted gangster gal. 2 days later, a subgun ended the story of Suicide Sal. It related the colorful story of a jilted gangster gal. 2 days later, a subgun ended the story of Suicide Sal. It related the colorful story of a jilted gangster gal. 2 days later, a subgun ended the story of Suicide Sal. It related the colorful story of a jilted gangster gal. 2 days later, a subgun ended the story of Suicide Sal.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
I think we're gonna open it up to some questions, some words. Get a little bit of light going on. Yeah. First of all, thanks everyone for coming out. We appreciate it. This was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you to Woody Guthrie Center. Thank you to Chloe for coordinating this. Thank you, Greg, for doing sound. Thank you, Jeremy and Elvis for filming this. It's an honor for this to be here.
Yeah.
So basically, the thoughts behind this performance, they go back to folk music and how its roots in outlaw culture have both been long-standing history of Oklahoma. A specific example of that would be Bonnie and Clyde. They had quite a few outings throughout these areas. Specifically, we had one happen in Stringtown. Okay, there was a shootout. Stringtown is a prison town, if you're aware. So we chose to use actually a poetry piece that Bonnie Parker wrote called The Story of Suicide Sal as the centerpiece of our noise composition, and we paralleled the actual composition with the arc of the storyline. So if you ever get a chance, you should go check out that poem, Story of Suicide Sal by Bonnie Parker. It's pretty great. But yeah, with that, if anyone has any questions about anything at all relevant to the performance or things in general, sir, with your hand in the air.
Hi. I'm just kind of curious if you've been using, like, throughout the last how many years you guys have been doing this, like adding more equipment and stuff slowly, and is there like an end point, or is it like, because this is pretty minimal, but I've seen like a lot of stuff before. What's the like goal when do you want to minimize some of the like instruments that you're about to like tamper with when you get to doing a performance? Is that the kind of goal?
This can be really helpful, especially this one's actually like pretty intricate compared to some stuff we've done previously. We had on this mixer, there's 6 different samples going simultaneously. We have 2 micro cassette players, a ham radio, a reel-to-reel, and a CD player, and then also a cassette player coming into it. And then a second cassette sample going into George's mixer, which has a feedback loop and 2 contact microphones going into it. So actually, when we were making this composition, we were a little worried that maybe we were putting too much on our plate to worry about as 2 people on stage. But in regards to hoarding gear, I always joke that all my passions in life are kind of just veiled excuses to hoard junk. So there's never really any point I reach where I feel like I've like got everything I've wanted. And I just get like old stuff, usually gifted to like me or George from friends, or a lot of pawn shop gear. Like really, there's nothing boutique about any of this. It's all pawn shop stuff and junk for the most part. Occasionally I get myself to like clean some stuff out and I'll throw out the broken stuff that I realize I'm just never actually gonna get fixed. But for the most part, there's really no end point. It's all just for exploration of sound and texture.
In reference to your question about like the amount of stuff we're using up here, I guess it kind of goes back, because we form a concept for the performances we do, so we'll have that idea and kind of develop what we want sonically to achieve that, and that comes down to picking out certain pedals and equipment that will give us the sounds that we think really tie in well with that.
We weren't actually even really able to start truly rehearsing this until a few weeks ago. We had started conceptualizing the piece in November and writing it down and thinking about all the timestamps and what exactly we want to happen and what we want to get across. But because Cold Love had a Zero installation up at the time that didn't come down to November 19th, like half of this equipment was over at the Zero Center up the street. So we had, which we didn't really think about, but we had to wait till the 19th to deinstall everything to even really begin rehearsals.
Anyone else doesn't have to be specific in the back there?
Yeah, that's good. I wonder if you would talk about noise in Tulsa, how you got into it, and kind of some of the connections with politics and with that. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. So me and George both got into noise. We're both graduates of Booker T. Washington High School, class of 2013. And around the time we were like 2016, or no, sorry, we were 16. We were exposed to it really primarily through a net label called Grindcore Karaoke. And that was kind of in the early ages of net labels before they kind of became so hyper proliferated. It was ran by a guy named Jay Randall from the band Agoraphobic Nosebleed. And it had like 500 something releases of just the most extreme music we'd ever been exposed to. And we got like really like obsessed with it for a while. We were constantly showing each other different releases we had found and downloaded on it. But that was kind of our first exposure to noise. And then in our late teens, we started working on really Beachmaster, I guess, honestly, collaboratively, and started doing stuff and scoring soundtracks to like early art films we were making on VHS and stuff. But we've been children of the DIY scene forever, basically. So we've always been going like, I guess, more extreme shows like punk and hardcore and metal. So it was kind of natural for us to eventually gravitate to more and more extreme stuff like noise concerts. And we just started making it, and then kind of just started attending shows and stuff locally, and even traveled some for it. And then we got integrated with Tulsa Noise. That's Nathan Young's project over the Tulsa Artist Fellowship, and things just kind of expanded from there. So I think we've been doing noise formally for like a decade now, probably. But noise music as a whole has a rich history of leftist radicalism. Well, actually, radicalism as a whole, unfortunately. But also leftist radicalism especially. And I think when you look at the roots of stuff like folk music, traditional folk music, not always as like contemporaries, that you see this tradition of leftist radicalism in politics in the music. But I mean, we're in the Woody Guthrie Center. Woody Guthrie was a communist, right? So that's purely parallel to noise music. I think in any sort of like DIY grassroots thing, there's always going to be a political slant to it. So it's only kind of natural in some ways that noise and folk music would both be different sides of the coin of like radical sound and radical music. There's still compilations that come out like I think Black Rituals in North Dakota did a Noise Against Fascism compilation recently that was all leftist anarchist noise projects. So really, despite sonically not necessarily reflecting each other all the time, there's totally parallels you could draw between folk music and noise music.
Well said.
Yeah, I don't know, did I answer all the questions? I could talk some more if you want.
Any other questions?
I'm curious what your first pieces of equipment were and how you started making noise.
Some of these actual pedals up here are the first pieces
Yeah,
that kind of
actually, yeah.
graduated with us. I think along the way we kind of just added piece together here and there. This sound is a lot different from where we started. I think we started doing we started doing some noise remixes, which relies more on samples and kind of manipulating sounds that already exist. Now we use samples in a way that it works more for us than us for it, if
Yeah.
that makes any sense. I mean, technical wise, we're starting to use more mixers now, and a lot more chords, a lot more things to think about while doing a performance. But yeah.
I think so. My first gear ever was an acoustic guitar. I took acoustic
We're going
guitar.
all the way
Yeah,
back.
I was gonna say George was a bass player, guitarist too. So we have, I guess, roots in traditional music, but we just kind of gravitated out there further and further as we aged. Yes.
Would you say like your roots were also in like the improvisation of this kind of form, and now you're recently, I guess, starting to compose things like that are I guess around a theme, right?
Yeah, totally.
And how recent would you say that started? I guess is my question.
Probably a few years, maybe a couple years.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and the level of composition has definitely increased. I mean, we would do stuff where we'd have a general idea, like say we're making a piece for a split release with someone. We have a general idea, and let's do something like that, and maybe take a couple runs at it. And okay, this one sounds good. Let's use that. And it's progressed since then to really hit home with a concept like this performance here.
I guess inherently there's a lot of just improvisation and like that kind of music, like noise and so on. And certainly, we were actually having a conversation about this just the other night about how lately in the last year or two it's been really nice to gravitate towards more structured, thought out pieces rather than just kind of like, I mean, frankly, this was kind of tame compared to some of the stuff we've done in the past. So like, I mean, not that, I do love the really loud, abrasive red line stuff, but it's really nice to do something that's like, I guess a little more thoughtful, you could say.
Y'all want to know how many decibels you got up to?
Yes.
We got 103.4 decibels.
Is that good?
I think it's closing in on a jet engine.
Yeah.
Good
I
question
have a
right here.
question. I was wondering, so you used the Suicide Cell poem as kind of thematically with your piece, I guess. I was wondering, were you looking specifically for a poem that matched the themes that you were trying to convey, or was it kind of just you stumbled upon it and built your piece around that poem?
The latter. So we were doing research and actually got a suggestion from someone in the audience who equated a lot of folk culture with outlaw culture, and then you think about outlaws and you think about outlaws and their locality to Oklahoma. And I mean, the biggest two that come to mind to me were Bonnie and Clyde, and coincidentally they had a stint through here, and also we're staying in Joplin, so very, very near. And through that, I was just curious to see their history, and I discovered that Bonnie Parker was a poet too, and that's kind of how I found that poem, and yeah, we formed a piece around that.
I guess also we should take a moment to thank Lauren Drummond, who's not here tonight. Those are all her vocals. She read the poem and recorded it and sent it to us that we used as samples, so that was all her voice. Yes.
So you're using all this, or I know,
I'll
yeah.
totally
A lot of retro equipment, which is hip and cool again and all of that, but do you use it, I mean, you're talking about reel to reel, you're talking about cassettes and things that are in pawn shops and some have been brought back, and there's a parallel to that when you're talking about folk music, there's a lot of use of stringed instruments now in a way that's very, in almost everything. So are you guys going to that because you get the sound you want out of it, or because of the feel of using stuff that dates back? What's the appeal of using a cassette tape versus all the digital assets that are available?
I'd say that with a mix of accessibility
Yeah.
So-
It's just a little bit of everything, because like it's honestly a lot of it is also just literally out of necessity because we don't have like a lot of nice digital equipment, and that's like in Cold Love's practice as a whole. There's a lot of like leading to the analog just because that's what was available to us and what we've grown with, and having grown with it, we of course naturally lean towards it. We don't use any like. I mean, when we use like, we're recording, we're using digital audio workstations, it's only to get a digital recording of the track. We don't do any mixing in that. All of our work we do for the tracks is completely outboard. And that was born out of necessity, but I guess now it's like a passion.
Right, and that translates to our visual work as well. Like this is recorded on a VHS-C, only to be recorded on a GoPro just so we could display it on the projector. So analog is kind of at the forefront of our practice these days.
And recently at the Zero Foundation, they had the Legacies of the Dust Bowl exhibit up, and it was talking a lot about it was talking about the Dust Bowl as a whole, but a lot about music and folk music from the Dust Bowl era, and technology from that time. So it all kind of plays into the traditions of folk music, and I guess what could be called retro analog feels. But, Yes.
So, first off, was dope.
Oh, thank you so much.
Appreciate it. I guess piggybacking off a couple of earlier questions, I found that the integration of a narrative through the sonic texture also, it was not very surprising for me for you to have said afterwards that you had scored some of your own films in the past. Do you think that that experience is something that you integrate more slowly over time, or as you evolve as an artist? Like, I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but you mentioned earlier that you are only more recently in the past couple of years moving towards something more thoughtful or composition based. Do you think that it's almost coming full circle, having experienced scoring something and weaving a narrative into your sonic textures in that way?
Yeah, I think it was kind of a natural evolution in a lot of ways, and like I think kind of like similar to what I was saying earlier about like with the gear, it started out as like a necessity, and then we just kind of grew with it. It started out a certain way, and it just kind of evolved from there. It's like not to say that not thoughtful stuff isn't pretty dope too, but
Right. I mean, I could also say our earlier stuff that was less conceptual was kind of us learning the tools, and once our knowledge gained and we learned really how to use them and what kind of sounds we could get out of them, it kind of was, like you said, a natural progression to steer it to something more conceptual.
And there's like a freedom where like you and I were talking about outside about the freedom of kind of that youthful ignorance about not knowing exactly what you're doing, and then looking back on that stuff and being like, wow, that was pretty interesting that I was able to do that, or how the hell did I even do that? So it's like, I don't know, it is funny how things change over time and what you learn and grow with.
Cut one back here.
Can you talk about your creative collaboration and the dynamics of that collaboration, both as you develop a piece and in live stage performance, how that all plays out?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the inception it just starts with an idea, and then we both just throw darts at a dartboard, figure out what we think is cool, what we don't think is cool, and from there just hone it in as far as the idea goes. And then from there, the process for picking out stuff for this specific performance was each of us kind of chose what devices we thought would sound best, and we put those on our mixer and had control of those. And the collaboration element just kind of comes from how those work together in tandem.
Frankly, I don't think we really were able to do truly fleshed out rehearsals until the last week or so, and finally all the small problems have been ironed out, because there's just so much to be accounted for, like even just like a loose cable can just throw everything off. So it does take there's an enormous amount of fleshing out. And we've worked together for so long now that it kind of just comes naturally. Like we grew up together and we've been collaborating since our late teens as far as like more serious creative projects go. So I don't know, it feels as naturally as doing it with like a family member or something.
I think you had a question?
Yeah, alright, so with this composition, every time you guys perform it, is it like a unique piece, or is it so it is unique? It isn't like, I exactly set out this certain way.
Right, yeah, it's specific to this performance. I don't know if we perform it again unless it was probably for Woody Guthrie Center, to be honest. Because yeah, we develop things now specifically for events, performances that we do. Have we ever repeated anything?
No, Beachmaster definitely hasn't. It's kind of like also just an expanse of like our greater creative practices though as individuals and as we're outside of Beachmasters. We're very into like one-of-one limited experiences, releases,
Rarities.
or whatever. Yeah, rarities, I guess. We like stuff to be like really personal and intimate for whoever's experiencing it. So this is probably the one and only time this is ever gonna happen.
Is Beachmaster the name like a reference to elephant seals?
Yeah.
Yeah, it totally is actually.
That is so awesome that you know that. I remember just watching some Discovery Channel documentary and I heard the term Beachmaster and I was like, oh, that has to be like a band name or project name associated. Yeah, that's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, nice deep cut knowledge. Yeah.
What bands have influenced you, and what filmmakers have influenced you guys?
That's a hard question. There's so many. I mean, filmmakers that come to mind immediately, just like Dario Argento, Mario Bava, so people, Italian horror directors that really utilize lighting in their films. Honestly, it plays a bigger role than most of the acting in their movies because the actors aren't that great. But music-wise, I don't even necessarily pull from noise for inspiration.
You guys like a band like Suicide?
Yeah, Suicide's sick. They're really rad. And that Bruce Springsteen album where he completely copied Suicide's sound, but it was an homage, so it was okay. But I don't know. I listen to everything and kind of just pull bits and pieces as inspiration, not so much copying to use in the actual sound, but just influence, I guess.
Nice.
I guess I was like originally hugely influenced by like Kingdom of Noise, which was like giant compilation of like early 80s and 90s era Japanese noise artists like music videos, and it's real weird and out there and subversive and stuff like that. And honestly, like animations, like the work that Huts in Australia does, had a huge influence on me growing up. Really, frankly, fringe internet videos, I guess, was really impactful for me. My cinema knowledge is kind of lacking, and George honestly kind of dictates what I view anymore. I don't really take the time to like sit and consume it like I should. So stuff like that. But I've like noise-wise, I'm a huge fan of Blur. Everything the Trash Fuck Records crew does in Detroit. Like honestly, a lot of the people that I like wound up growing up with in the scene were like I guess so-called older heads. Like were it's hugely influential on me. But like all that grindcore karaoke stuff was incredibly, profoundly impactful. Maybe life ruining. So I'd say.
Nice.
James doesn't exist. One artist featured on Grindcore Karaoke. Rest in peace, Remy.
Yeah,
that was a huge influence on, I think, both of us.
Yeah, all of Remy Galvin's projects were hugely impactful. Contractor in Kansas City. My gosh, just all the noise people we've met along the way, honestly. I've got a grotesque collection of noise cassettes and records. And it's hard off the top of my head to even name people. Of course, like all the Japanese people, like the contemporaries, like Cosmoto Endo is really good. Store Spawn. There's some amazing. The Japanese scene as a whole has been hugely impactful on me.
If there are no more questions, thanks again, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much.